My name's Karen Newby. I'm a nutritionist, nutritional therapist, and today I'm going to be taking you through a number of different areas that as nutritional therapists we work with, largely all connected with our well-being in these unprecedented times, these are very strange times that we find ourselves in. I will be talking about stress and resilience and mental well-being and how food has a massive impact on that. Obviously, my specialist area is nutrition, but there are other pillars that we're all very aware of, I'm sure, to help with well-being and especially mental well-being. But I always say that nutrition is very much a sort of first port of call. If your nutrition isn't optimum or is imbalanced, then it makes sense that there will be further kind of imbalances and issues along the way. So as a nutritional therapist, I work a lot with people with chronic issues, chronic disease. Those include things like insomnia, anxiety, depression. I work a lot with perimenopause and female hormone problems, but also I have a children's clinic as well. And my background is as a BS, studied a BSc in nutritional medicine. So everything that I'm going to talk about today is very much rooted in science. Basically, nutrition is all about biochemistry. If it figures that if you don't have the right nutrients in your diet or an imbalance of nutrients, then the chemical reactions, if you like, in the body which need these nutrients aren't going to work as effectively, and this is where ill health then starts to manifest. So first off, I sent you all the stress test, and for those of you who are happy to share your scores, do put them in the chat now. But obviously for those of you who don't want to share the scores, that's absolutely fine. The stress test is a really good way of seeing objectively what levels of stress that you're dealing with at the moment. I think for a lot of us, we all know what stress means, but we don't know what it means. We don't, stress manifests itself in us in different ways. So for some people that could be lack of sleep, for other people that could be comfort eating, for others it could be anxiety, or on the other end of the scale, depression. For those of us with stress, it could be, hormonal problems, lack of menstruation, for example, for women with lots of stress. So it can manifest in lots of different ways, which is why, stress is so hard to sort of pin down. And, stress was only ever used as an engineering term before the 1940s. So we go through 2 world wars without talking about stress, whereas stress now is so very omnipresent in our world. So thank you for those who are popping in your scores. Oh, there's a very low one there, which is great. Basically, the rule of thumb is anything over 150 is defined as high stress. Anything over 300 is super high stress, and you really need to sort this, start helping your body as much as possible. Yes, Emma? You raised your hand. If you want to put all your questions in the chat, because I've got access to that, do go ahead, Emma, if you had a question. Didn't mean to. But as I say, if you have got any questions throughout, please put it in the chat and I will answer them as we go, or leave it to the end. Yes, it's basically anything over 150, you probably will have started to see some form of imbalance in your body due to stress. That does show that you have got quite a lot of stress going on. But as I say, anything over 300, that's really high stress, and you're more likely to be very obviously showing signs of stress-related issues. So, sorry. So what I wanted to go through first is to sort of summarize really how we are so far away from our biochemistry. Our bodies haven't had the reboot that's needed to deal with our everyday world. And, one of these ancient systems that we look at is the body clock. As you can see here, this is a body clock that's largely works with our circadian rhythm, which is working with sleep-wake cycles. And for a lot of us, our sleep is a big issue, and this is something I'll be talking more in depth when I see you again in a couple of weeks. But we are so often so sort of jet lagged that we wake up feeling exhausted, and then we're exhausted after lunch, that sort of 3 o'clock slump. And then once it gets to early evening, we start to wake up and we get that sense of wired and tired and can't actually get to sleep. And this is because our body systems are all out of kilter. And I'll be going through some easy kind of wins to get us back into balance. The body clock is really important. And as you'll see on here, there are lots of systems, well, all our systems, aside from our sleep-wake cycle, are related to our circadian rhythm, even down to our immune system. So our body is so clever, it thinks, well, at night, when I'm asleep, when the body's asleep, that's when you're less likely to injure yourself. So the immune system gets times to repair and rest and start to recharge, ready for being more on high alert during the day when we're more likely to get injured, or we would have done when we were sort of Stone Age man, as it were, or living in the savannah with wild animals around. But there's also, it's related to hormones as well, insulin secreting. And, at the end of the day, at the moment, we are so out of kilter that, for example, our melatonin secretion, so melatonin is all about the Dracula hormone, is often not, is suppressed. So one of the main reasons for this is the fact that we are, we're still hunter-gatherers. Our body still thinks it needs to run away from a wild animal or fight it. It cannot tell the difference. The response is exactly the same. It can't tell the difference to us being stressed at our desk, getting stressed over spreadsheets or client calls, versus being in the savannah and needing to run away or fight. The processes are the same. And when you drink caffeine, for example, this has the same effect. So cortisol is our stress hormone, and cortisol is released every time we have a stressful event, and it is released in order to increase blood glucose from our store blood glucose from our liver and our muscles, in order to redirect resources to our heart, to our lungs, to our eyes, to our brain, in order to do something physical. It thinks we need to do something physical, and you can sort of feel that, can't you? When you're stressed, your heart starts to go. You have a sort of a clarity of thought, and that's why caffeine is quite useful, because it is sort of creating that sort of unnatural sort of fight or flight. But if you've got a lot of work to do, you need a clarity of thought, and that can help. But unfortunately, 60,000 years ago, we would have had short spikes of stress. We would have had, initial kind of stress things that wouldn't last throughout the day. Whereas now what we're dealing with is constant levels of stress brought on by our society, but also what we're putting in here, be that food or caffeine or alcohol, etc., etc. And obviously at the moment, when we're living in a sort of a COVID-19 world, what we're putting in our mouths is very important for us at the moment. And I'll talk briefly about the immune system in a bit. So our brain is 60,000 years old. And what we call the lizard brain is a part of the brain that is deep within our brain, the amygdala, which is all about fear or survival, basically. So if you are sort of feeling anxious, or this is stimulating a very ancient part of our brain, because what's important to the brain is survival over anything else. Love this quote from Ruby Wax: your brain is designed to keep you alive, it doesn't give a shit about your happiness. And this is so very true. That lizard brain, that ancient brain, is all about making sure that we can fight that wild animal or run away. It stimulates the sympathetic nervous system, which is all about survival. And the problem is that cortisol, the stress hormone, is so dominant, along with adrenaline and noradrenaline, that it downregulates a lot of systems. that it thinks it doesn't need. Because let's face it, if we are in fight or flight mode, we don't need to digest food. The body thinks, no, I'll save that till later, which is why if you're really stressed and you eat, your digestive enzymes won't be as high as they are when you're in a relaxed state, because actually the body is like, no, I need to survive here. It also downregulates systems such as your endocrine system, your hormone system. So that's why when I see patients whose periods, for example, for women out there, have stopped, it can often be to do, or are dysregulated, it can often be to do with high cortisol levels. The brain also thinks, okay, I don't need to detoxify, so I'm going to just pause the detox systems, and I'm going to and obviously with all of that, that can increase inflammation and toxicity, which isn't very helpful, especially at this time as well. And this is why quite often when you go on holiday, your cortisol levels, your stress levels reduce, and then suddenly you get ill. Like often when you stop, because suddenly the body's like, oh my God, at last, stress is down, I can start repairing the body, the immune system starts to come up. You know, cortisol is the body's natural anti-inflammatory, so that's why, you know, you can often feel ill when you stop. But it also thinks, okay, I don't want to sleep, because if I'm in this kind of high stress situation, I cannot be sleeping. You know, sleep isn't good for protection, is it? If we're fast asleep, we're not going to be able to protect ourselves as well as we could do. And it's also about mental health as well. Cortisol is very stimulating, and it creates more messages for the brain, and the brain finds that very hard to deal with, which is why we have burnout. And please, you know, anyone with, you know, high stress scores there, please look after yourself. And hopefully some of these recommendations today will set you on the right path. So this is the problem with our world. And when I look at technology, you know, we go from, you know, 20 years ago having no tech to now. And obviously technology is hugely positive, you know, it has lots of positive things about it, especially as we find ourselves in lockdown. But it tricks our brain into, you know, quite often if we've got a lot of tech using technology, it has basically extended, for example, our work day. Rather than sort of the 9 till 5, our office is now on our phone or on our laptop. It follows us home. We are constantly on our screens. You know, we should be one of the most healthful sort of species on the planet, and yet there are such high instances of anxiety, of depression, of obesity, of chronic disease, and because we're sort of running on empty, really. We sleep 20% less than we used to, even 25 years ago. We are basically tricking our brain. If you think about that sort of body clock, because of the light that's emitted from our technology, that actually stimulates adrenaline through the eye, through the retina, to stay awake. If we, you know, even lights from our, you know, household lights at night stop melatonin from being produced, because it thinks the body is tricked into thinking it's still daytime. So this is a big issue, and it creates a catch-22. And I love this illustrator, actually, Alexandra Olino on Instagram. She really does sum up to me modern life. And the problem is that if we have too much stress hormone, we don't sleep well. And if we don't sleep well, we wake up feeling exhausted, and then we're more likely to reach for caffeine and sugar and alcohol, which is sugar, and carbohydrates, in order to get us through the day, which then affects our sleep again. So we get this sort of catch-22 going. We spend half of our day stimulating ourselves to wake ourselves up, and then the other half of our day trying to calm ourselves down, ready for sleep. You know, we have become so distant from our natural rhythms. And I do actually think that lockdown does have some benefits to this, aside from the fact that for a lot of you, you're not having to deal with a massive commute, but we are more in tune with how we were even 50 years ago, whereby we would eat as the path of the sun. Our day would be sort of structured around light and darkness 100 years ago even. Whereas, you know, or we would eat at certain times of day, you know, certainly during lockdown, food is, you know, one of the biggest kind of highlights of all our days now, which I do think is a positive thing. I hope you would agree with me. And this sort of habits that we formed before lockdown, it's a great way to potentially help break those habits. And hopefully you've already started to break some habits, so that when we go back to the new normal, we can feel more healthful and start to make long-term change. So for a lot of us, we wake up exhausted, so we reach for caffeine before we've eaten anything, probably won't have breakfast. Then we get that real dip mid-morning, so we have breakfast at our desk, getting stressed, more caffeine, and then we'll have lunch on the go. We won't give ourselves a full lunch hour. We will just run around and grab something on the go. And then what we'll do is we'll come home and we're so stressed out, and frazzled, we can't actually think about what we're going to cook. So we sort of snack and then think about something to cook, and then we're not really hungry, but we're going to eat anyway. And then we find ourselves so busy scrolling through all our social media, or catching up with emails, or watching that extra Tiger King session on Netflix, that we're then so overly stimulated we can't get to sleep. We're wired and tired. So having spent the whole day rushing around and feeling exhausted, we now feel wide awake. The amount of patients I have that could literally start their day at sort of 9 o'clock, suddenly have this clarity of thought that they can start doing all their admin, start doing the housework, or start doing loads of work at that time. So I do think that lockdown can be a really beneficial time. We can take positives from it to break that cycle, because obviously now we do have more time to cook. We do have more time to think about breakfast, as opposed to our usual commute and stress trying to get to work. We are, I would hope, feeling benefits from not rushing around so much. So obviously I can't do anything about your external stress, unfortunately, but I certainly can help your internal stress. I can help your body become more resilient to stress. And one of the main things that nutritional therapy can help with is sorting out your blood sugar balancing. So blood sugar is a real problem, because, as I say, our bodies haven't changed in 60,000 years, but our lifestyle and our food intake has massively, even over the last 25 years, which on top of technology is affecting our health massively. So these are all signs and symptoms that you have a bit of out of balance blood sugar. Now, you don't have to have type 2 diabetes to have problems with blood sugar balancing. Metabolic syndrome is pre-diabetes, but you can also have, even before metabolic syndrome, you can have these signs and symptoms that show that your blood sugar is a bit out. So one of the classic ones is feeling clammy, feeling shaky and faint before eating, and having that feeling of, I need to eat now, that hangry feeling. This is a classic sign that your blood sugar is low and the body is going, alarm bell, I need sugar, I need it fast. Are you a different person after eating? And this can go for your children as well. This is, I work a lot with kids with ADHD and anxiety, and blood sugar balancing massively exacerbates these issues. Are you addicted to Diet Coke? Not even Coke. For me, I'd much rather, at least you know where you are with a Coke and a packet of Haribos. It's the sort of hidden sugars that you often find in granolas and fruit juices and low fat, high sugar yogurts, and Diet Coke. These sort of the artificial sweeteners and the aspartame and the caffeine often makes people even more addicted to them. So the reason being blood sugar is so important is because the brain is very affected by highs and lows of blood sugar. And if you get a low in blood sugar, the body releases cortisol. So this is what I mean about helping your internal stress. If you've got a lot of cortisol anyway, the last thing you want is to have loads of blood sugar to then increase cortisol even further. So basically what happens in the morning is quite often for a lot of us, we'll have sort of tea and toast or just coffee or toast or sugary granolas or whatever out of a cereal packet. And this causes our blood sugar to go really high. And this is why after having caffeine and sugar, suddenly we get like a zing of energy. You know, our dopamine receptors that are stimulated with sugar, all in the frontal cortex, are all very happy, and we have energy to to get through the day. But what happens is, and I always say this after a tea or a coffee, they only last until the next one. And this is why, because you have a high and then you have a low. And the brain really wants to keep blood sugar within these grey lines. Our body can only deal with 1 teaspoon an hour of sugar. If you look at the back of your packs, food packs, per 100 grams, anything over them 15 grams per 100 grams is classified high sugar. 1 teaspoon of sugar is 4 grams. So you can sort of get an idea of how much sugar you're having just in that sort of bowl of whatever, granola or whatever. And do take into account that rice and pasta is sugar. So even though they look like they're low sugar items when you look at the nutrients, and potatoes, I would say, and bread, actually when you cook rice and pasta, that massively increases their GI load, their glycemic index. So basically the brain, if the blood sugar goes too low, then this sets off this cortisol, this alarm hormonal system, including adrenaline and noradrenaline, to stimulate release of of glucose from the liver and the muscles, which is where we store our glucose. So then this gets blood sugar back up. But unfortunately, every time you have these roller coasters, we call them, these blood sugar roller coasters, this is zapping you of essential vitamins, largely, that are needed for energy production. And these include vitamin C and B vitamins. And unfortunately, with vitamin C, we don't store vitamin C. We're the only animal, aside from guinea pigs and a certain form of gorilla, I think, is it gorilla or monkey, that don't store vitamin C. So we need vitamin C every single day, and we need good amounts of it. And unfortunately, for a lot of us, we're just not getting enough vitamin C. But also, the more stressed you are, the more you need vitamin C. And at the moment, when we're talking about the immune system, and COVID-19, vitamin C is even more crucially important, because vitamin C has antiviral properties. It won't necessarily stop you from getting it. It's like with a common cold, but it will help your body's innate immune system, which is the first line of defense. It will help support that, both sides of the immune system, actually, the adaptive as well, the special forces of the immune system, to help get rid of viruses. And actually there are tests going on in China, and there's also been a recent bit of research in New York about high dosages of vitamin C given to ICU patients of COVID-19, but that's all ongoing research. So it's really important from a stress perspective to keep our blood sugar in check. I can't tell you what an easy win this is, really, to help with lots of different processes in the body. If you suffer with anxiety or low mood or irritability or PMS or anything like that, then these low blood sugar moments will exacerbate those feelings. So by keeping our blood sugar nicely stable, this gives you not only a drip feed of energy to help you get through the morning without constantly having to sort of snack, but it will also help your happiness levels as well. So when I go to London, obviously haven't been for a while, I can feel the stress in the air. You know, the stress is palpable. I don't walk quick enough. I dare to look people in the face. I live in Brighton, by the way. But I find that the energy in London is really motivating. And I am a real believer that stress can be a positive force if you can adapt to it. It can be very motivating, and you know, especially from a work perspective as well. But for a lot of us, it can be overwhelming. And this is when burnout happens. And, you know, burnout is real, people. So, you know, for any of you with high schools, these are things that you can put in place that will help your resilience and help you deal with what life throws at you. So eating breakfast is really important, and eating breakfast is important because of the blood sugar that I've shown you. If you eat a good breakfast, that will minimize the need for caffeine because you will have energy. It will help fuel your brain in order to do work, and keep you, you know, feed your gut, feed your digestive system, so that to support you. You know, you need food at the start of the day, and it doesn't matter if you're fasting as well, whatever your sort of fast time is that you break your fast. But, you know, we need sustenance during the day. And for so many of us, we eat most of our food at the end of the day when we don't need the sustenance. Then that's when it's more likely just to be laid down as fat or interfere with sleep. So keeping blood sugar balance is really important. So caffeine, again, another great illustration here. Caffeine is fine. You know, if you're sleeping well, you know, 2 cups is fine. But I would say for all of us, actually, a really good way for having caffeine is to have it with food. So if you're really enjoying that first cup of coffee, have it with your breakfast. It lessens the effect on our stress hormones with food. It's the same as with alcohol. If you drink alcohol on an empty stomach, you'll have a much greater effect than you would if you'd had it with food. So that's the same premise with caffeine. Vitamin C is really important. So cortisol, adrenaline and noradrenaline are all kicked out from these tiny little glands called the adrenal glands that sit on top of the kidneys, and they need lots of vitamin C. And also, if you're perimenopausal, our adrenal glands are very important for us post-menopause, because they kick out estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen after our ovaries stop, which is why it's really important to get adrenal health sorted before you're moving into perimenopause. Just as an aside there. So magnesium is really important. So magnesium is nature's tranquilizer. It's something that often we are very low in. If you look at the nutrition rolling nutrition data study from Public Health England, magnesium is often low, as is iron and as is zinc. So magnesium, along with calcium actually, which is also nature's tranquilizer, very calming for the body. If you get things like twitchy leg at night, or lots of PMS cramping or migraines, magnesium can really help here. So Epsom bath salts, if you have any, green leafy vegetables, nuts and seeds, especially pumpkin seeds, really good source of magnesium, but very calming. So nutrient intakes, we'll talk a bit more about foods to optimize your nutrient intakes in a bit. B vitamins are very important for the nervous system, very calming again. So if you have anxiety, B vitamins are important for you as well. But adaptogens, maca, turmeric, if you've got any fresh turmeric, you can pop it in the freezer and then sort of grate it into curries as and when needed. Ashwagandha you can get in supplement form. So these are all things that can help with the stress response. And yeah, and just making sure that you're moving as well. Obviously at the moment as well, if you are suffering a lot with anxiety, calming using, you know, nutritional therapy, your brain needs feeding. And actually in Ayurvedic medicine, you know, the brain is very much linked to the body, whereas in in sort of Western medicine, it's often sort of siloed away from the body, mental health, whereas actually, you know, your brain is so related to your body and vice versa. They are constantly communicating with each other. If you even think about being stressed, or think about something really stressful, that immediately affects your stress hormones and your endocrine system in the body. It creates physical changes in the body and vice versa. So it's very important to feed your brain as well as your body. So GABA, obviously green tea has L-theanine in, which helps with GABA production. By lowering cortisol, you increase the other steroid hormone, which works in harmony with cortisol, which is DHEA, which is calming. Serotonin, and we'll come to low mood in a minute, but serotonin is our happiness neurotransmitter. You can never have too much serotonin. And serotonin is kind of slightly different from dopamine. We all know about dopamine. It's the reward system. That's in that sort of prefrontal cortex, which is after eating lots of sugar. Dopamine receptors are very excitable. But dopamine is very much about reward, and it can also increase addictions. That's addictive behavior, if you like. Whereas serotonin, most of our serotonin is made in the gut. It helps create a sort of a deep-seated sense of happiness, and serotonin is very outward. You want to do things for other people, etc. Very much more community focused. But obviously, if you don't have enough, this can really exacerbate anxiety. Zinc is really important for anxiety, especially if you suffer with OCD. Zinc-rich foods, which I'll come to in a bit. Sugar balancing, caffeine. So alcohol, unfortunately, with alcohol, this doesn't really work with anxiety, and I'm sure all of you out there who do suffer with anxiety would agree with me. And the reason being is, aside from the fact that it is actually sugar, so it has an effect on your blood sugar balance and causing those sort of highs and lows. If you wake up in the night after drinking, it's often to do with highs and lows of blood sugar. That low of blood sugar has increased cortisol, which then wakes you up. But the problem is with alcohol related to anxiety is that it depletes our stores of zinc. And zinc is really important for mental health. And as I said, on that sort of nutrition data survey, zinc is often very low. Zinc is really important for the immune system as well, for T cells in the body. So it's important to make sure that we're getting enough of it, especially if you find at the moment that your OCD has got worse, or you're sort of suffering more with panic attacks and anxieties. It's very important. Get some Epsom bath salts. You can buy them online really cheaply, just as long as it's magnesium sulfate. You don't need to use any of the fancy brands. But this helps magnesium actually be absorbed through the skin. And it's really, just a really old remedy that is great to have just before bed to help with nighttime, to help with sleep. And I would say this about the media, the way that the media is talking, sort of not the scare stories, but, the way, and, you guys are working PR, you understand how it works, but I definitely found my happiness levels increase when I reduced my consumption of media to twice a day, especially at the start. It has kind of, it has got a bit better recently, but at the start it was desperately fearful, and it was, it wasn't great for one's mental health. Breathing techniques all help to stimulate the rest and digest, the parasympathetic nervous system, we call it, which is all about calming. And as I say, for most of us, we're in the sympathetic nervous system state, which is all about fight or flight. So we need to move ourselves over, especially if we're suffering with anxiety. Breathing techniques, yoga, connecting the body with the mind through breath is a great and a very intelligent form of exercise anyway. But that's a great exercise to do at the moment. If you're really anxious, do you really need to do a HIIT workout, which is going to be stimulating even more cortisol? Something like walking or yoga might be better for you. And getting out in nature as much as you can. Obviously it's hard in London, and even in Brighton, unless you go to the sea. We don't have so many trees around here. But even if you can stare out the window and have a wide gaze, basically staring into space, and sort of meditating a bit, but even if it's just staring and having that wide gaze, that can really help. I can't tell you enough how important the gut is at the moment. Well, the gut is, Hippocrates said all disease stemmed from the gut. And I still think a lot of that is very relevant, very pertinent. From a happiness perspective, working with patients with low mood, with depression, helping the gut has a massive impact on how the brain is affected. So when we were in vitro, when we were as a fetus, the bundle of brain cells, basically nervous system cells, there were two. They separated out, and half of them went to the brain and half of them went to the gut. So the nerve cells in the gut so in the body, after the brain and the spinal column, most of our nerve endings, most of our nerve cells, the greatest amount is in the gut. And when I do talks with children at schools, they all get that whole butterflies in the stomach feeling, that anxiety in the stomach. And actually our stomach is here, it's quite high up, and actually around our belly button, that's the gut. And that's why we hold so much emotion in the gut, which is why as adults we have the manifestation, which is IBS, which is very much linked to stress and manifesting in gut dysbiosis or imbalance. The important thing for our world at the moment as well is that 2/3 of our immune system is there. Our gut is the greatest barrier against the outside world aside from the skin. So it's really important to have good gut integrity, not leaky gut or permeable gut where things get through into the bloodstream that shouldn't. As I say, most of our serotonin is made in the guts, and that serotonin, the happiness neurotransmitter, we need to make sure that our gut is our garden, if you like, our microbiome is functioning well, so that we can be sure that our serotonin production is working, is good enough. So any issues with gut, like constipation, or the other side of loose stools, bloating, gas, urgency to go to the toilet, they're all signs that your microbiome are out of balance, and it's very important to feed the gut. And this will help your happiness levels and your immune system levels as well. So just a quick thing on the immune system. We are all unique, and I think that's really important because which explains why some people are catching COVID-19 and not even seeing any symptoms versus those that are in the ICU and where it's very severe. But we're all unique, and the reason is that the human race needs us to all be unique, otherwise we would have died out a long time ago. So there are lots of pillars, if you like, to good immune system health, and it's not just about what you eat, although nutrition has a massive impact on the immune system. But we have to also look at other areas as well. One of them is amount of stress. As we said before, stress, cortisol, adrenaline, noradrenaline redirects resources away from other systems, and that includes the immune system. So you might be having a great diet, but if your stress load is really high and you're near burnout, then your immune system response is going to be low. The gut, as I said, the microbiome is really important, and there's more and more research into how the gut bacteria are communicating with the immune system, that are communicating with the endocrine system and with brain function as well. Obviously, very important to get that barrier working well. Detoxification, really important. We need to be making sure that we get rid of excess toxins and pathogens out of the body. So these include the lungs. Make sure that when you go to bed you always have a window open to help the fresh air come in. This can also help with fever as well, but the fresh air will help deliver fresh air to the lungs, because obviously the lungs are getting rid of rubbish as well as alcohol. Also the liver is very important detoxification organ, obviously the premier detox organ. So on waking, so bitter foods are really good for the liver on waking. So something like a slice of lemon in hot water is a really good way to wake up the liver before you have anything. The kidneys are also very important here. So making sure that you have enough water every day helps to flush the kidneys. The kidneys are in charge of, among other things, aside from blood pressure, but they're also in charge of filtering the blood. So 1.5 litres for a woman, 2 litres for a man if you're not doing loads of exercise or sweating loads, is good to flush out and keep the kidneys working well. But also the skin. So Epsom bath salts are very good to help the skin get rid of stuff as well. Sleep is really important. So for some people, their superpower might be sleep. They might not have an issue. I mean, I certainly don't have problems with sleep. I would say stress load or stress resilience is something that really does affect me from my immune system perspective. Sleep is your biggest anabolic window in your 24 hours. And, you know, I will be talking a lot more about that next time. But it's really important for rest and digest, rest and repair as well. Movement is really important for our lymphatic system. So our lymph is what delivers our special forces, the adaptive immune system, and it's very important for filtration as well. So that's, yeah, making sure that we're moving is very important for the immune system. Mindful techniques, as I said before, but also a good diet. So what does a good diet mean? I can't bear the whole balanced diet thing. What is a balanced diet? For me, it's well, the Mediterranean diet is one of the most well-researched diets. It's full of diversity of plants, although, you know, we just take the pizza and the pasta that comes from Italy or the Mediterranean, but, you know, the fish, the good lean meats, but also just the amount of herbs. You know, pesto making at the moment is great to get lots of polyphenols into the diet. So polyphenols is very antioxidant rich. You can just put in a sort of pestle and water, whatever herbs you have going, with a little bit of olive oil, and that helps for them to be well digested, a little bit of fat to get the antioxidants, polyphenols in. So you can experiment with that in the kitchen. Vitamin C, as I've said, this is really important. So parsley is a great source of vitamin C, as well as even garlic has quite a lot of vitamin C. And obviously your green leafy veg, just make sure that you're steaming and not broiling, so you're not losing the vitamin C. Vitamin C is very unstable, which is why when you bite an apple, that sort of brown, if you leave it for a bit, that's the vitamin C dissolving into the air. So just be aware of that. So zinc, really important, as we've said before, for mental well-being, but really important for T helper cells and immune system modulation, as is vitamin C actually for immune modulation. So lean beef, prawns, but obviously if you're vegan, tofu, tempeh, pulses, the nuts and seeds, you know, things that we're often not getting enough in our diet. Vitamin A, obviously offal, not so much eaten now, but obviously liver is one of the highest sources of vitamin A. Vitamin A is stored really well in the body, actually. So if you've had some of these sources recently, then you're storing it very well. It's a fat-soluble vitamins, as is vitamin D. So, but vitamin D is more of a steroid hormone, actually, or it is a steroid. Vitamin D is so important for the immune system, but vitamin D is really important for mental well-being and gut integrity as well. As I said before, with the gut, with the microbiome, we want to make sure things don't get through the gut wall into the bloodstream. And vitamin D can help with keeping what's called the T junctions. They're little junctions in our gut that open up when we've eaten to let nutrients through, but if they open up too much, can let things through that shouldn't be there, and which can cause issues in the body, like, you know, foggy head, for example. And vitamin D is kind of like a gatekeeper. It helps keep those gates at the right width apart, so things don't get through that shouldn't. So obviously the sun, and actually the sunshine has been hugely beneficial during this time. This is why during the winter months, we are more prone to common colds and influenza and viruses. Vitamin D is very much linked to acute respiratory illness as well, lack of. And I do wonder, with research going on with BAM groups, you know, if you do have darker skin and live in this country, do get your vitamin D checked. You can get a finger prick test to get them checked. But as I say, going outside, making the most of any sort of sunshine during the day will massively help your intake. As I say, most of it comes from the sunshine. Food sources are relatively low. Protein, amino acids, bone broth. Protein is the building block of the body and is the building block of antibodies, and you know, it's so important. And for so many of us, we have a lot of carbohydrates in our diet and not enough protein. Omega-3, very important. Omega-3 is really important for brain health. You know, 60% of the brain is fat. And since the sort of 1970s, unfortunately, fat has been demonized in the diet, and you know, we've never been so ill, and it's not because of the fat, it's because of the sugar. Yeah, tinned fish is fine. You know, how we used to have sardines on toast or pilchards, you know, they're really reasonable as well. Iron, really important. If you're drawn to sort of darker cuts of poultry, it's probably a sign that you're sort of iron deficient. And again, in that sort of data survey, often women and teenage girls are very low in iron. So just to be mindful of upping your iron, but also when you have iron, to have with vitamin C sources as well, to help the iron be absorbed into the body. You know, at the end of the day, we are what we digest as opposed to what we eat. Garlic, really antibacterial. Phytonutrients I've mentioned, you know, the fresh herbs, adaptogens, and just be aware that sugar is actually an anti-nutrient, and sugar feeds viruses and bacteria, loves it, but also, you know, it doesn't even give you any nutrients when you have sugar, and actually what it does is it uses up nutrients in the body to get rid of it. So it's kind of like a net, it's less than. Just a little bit on snacking. Try to have little micro fasts if you can. It really helps with brain function. It helps give the body a rest. It helps reduce lots of insulin, storage hormone. Quite often we think we're hungry, but actually we're thirsty. And I know working from home is a nightmare because you're very close to your kitchen. But just if you're feeling peckish mid-morning, just have a glass of water, and quite often it's just you are thirsty as opposed to being hungry. Something to think about anyway. And you know, all this kind of processing of food, you know, we're constantly eating, we're constantly snacking, we're not even realizing we're doing it half the time, and that's why thinking about breakfast and having a good solid breakfast helps to reduce this kind of need to snack. And as I say here, you know, quite often we have an abundance of food, but in terms of nutrients, they're often very low. I can't tell you, you know, the rainbow foods, you know, it's so important. You know, fruit and vegetables, getting them at least 8 portions a day. That's why smoothie making with your NutriBullet, you can dust off now the weather's got a bit better. But juicing, if you have a juicer, is such a great way of getting a massive micronutrient hit. Especially for vitamin C, especially for those polyphenols, which massively increase nutrients to the brain. You know, the brain doesn't like too much sugar, and the brain does not like too much toxins either. And allowing yourself to have antioxidant rich foods as much as possible really will help oxygenate your brain and will make you feel much brighter and less foggy headed. You know, water. All humans and children, all we need to drink or eat is water, really. So if you have that as a rule of thumb, then, you know, obviously have other bits and bobs here and there, it's fine, but most of your liquids should be from water, and also herbal teas can go towards that sort of 1.5 to 2 litres a day. But use this time to sort of shake up what you're doing. You know, I always post on my Facebook page what I'm cooking, and you know, I don't make my own recipes, but I link through to recipes that I'm using. You know, you don't even need recipe books anymore, you just need Google. But things like ramens I make a lot of, you know, the curries, and all of these foods are so great the next day. And now that we're at home, we can warm up food really easily. We can, you know, eat 3 square meals a day, as opposed to sort of eating on the go, or not eating, or, you know, eating at sort of strange times. So just finally, a little bit on menu planning. Always take now that we don't go to supermarkets so often, and actually even when this finishes, I mean, I shop a lot local anyway. I'm very lucky to live in an area of Brighton where we have, you know, I've got a greengrocers, I've got a deli, I've got, although I will probably have to remortgage if I keep shopping in the deli, but you know, I do have a nice veggie sort of grains and sort of refill shops, etc. So I can do a lot of my food shopping locally, and I get deliveries of meat from the butchers, and I get deliveries of fruit and veg from Abel and Cole. But as much as possible, if you are going to the supermarket, to take a list with you, to even menu plan just 3 meals that you think you're going to make. I always say make doubles, that you can have them for lunch the next day. You know, that's leftovers for lunch, you know, things like kedgeree, even curries, you know, roasted veg that you might have, you know, make the most of your oven as well when you're cooking stuff, to bung in some roasted veg to have for salads the next day. Always look at the best before labels, and that's definitely something for at the moment as well, just to check, because you don't want to go to the shops too often, so you want to make sure that you've got stuff that's going to be in date for as long as possible. Things like pulses and all of the sort of tinned fish and pulses I have in my cupboard, along with massive herbs and spices. Now, if you have a little garden, you can buy the fresh herbs from the supermarket and plant them in pots outside, because the weather's good enough now and they will just grow. And you can pick them and come again. But you know, using spices to flavour food, using pulses are just so cheap, but they're also great sources of nutrients, and are very quick to make. I always say, you know, the suffragettes were some of the first proponents of vegetarian cookery, because it took them away from slaving over a hot stove with meat for hours on end. So it is much more efficient, and obviously, you know, things like bean salads. But as I say, I do post a lot of my recipes if you want to just see what I'm doing. And I've got two teenage boys as well who are eating me out of house and home. So for me, it's very important, the protein side of things and good fats, in order to keep up satiety levels, so they're not constantly asking me for food as well. I don't agree with Oscar Wilde on this. I think we can be brilliant at breakfast and not be dull. But as I said before, you know, breakfast doesn't need to be something out of a packet that's sweet. You know, I've lived a long time in Asia. In Asia, they eat the same things for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I think it's only in the West that we sort of feel that this is something that is, you know, I think this is probably the sort of the Kellogg's, isn't it? The way that they used to market themselves for breakfast. So it's still very much in our way of eating, but obviously not the Campbell's tomato soup. But you know, eating what you'd eat it for your evening meal, I don't have a problem with that for breakfast. You know, something savoury. You know, I love this advertising campaign that was in the 70s, Faye Weldon, go to work on an egg. I love the fact that kids got a little cup of tea there as well. But you know, eggs, you have got time now to cook eggs any which way. You know, avocado on toast with tomatoes and mushrooms is great. And you will notice the difference if you make time to have a full breakfast. Like we used to in the olden days. This will massively affect your happiness and your that nice kind of even blood sugar through the morning. You know, hummus on toast with sliced avocado is great. Even the more sophisticated, like the shiklaka, you know, baked eggs with lentils, etc., are great things. You don't need to wait to the weekend now. Because it's, you know, we do have the time. So yeah, I don't know if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer, but as I say, I will send through a crib sheet to Layli, and she can distribute it as well with some notes from the session. And yeah, that's it from me. But yeah, if anyone's got any questions, do let me know. If not, you can email me afterwards. I'm more than happy to answer them. So I hope you have a nice lunch now, and I will see you again in a couple of weeks. Oh, are vitamin supplements like Berocca helpful? Well, Berocca, the problem is with Berocca, I would say definitely supplements are useful, especially at this time for vitamin C. And Berocca is a great source of, it has got a lot of vitamin C in it. But the problem with Berocca has got aspartame in it, and aspartame isn't that helpful for the body, especially if you're suffering anxiety or if you have ADHD. It's very excitatory to the brain, aspartame. It stimulates glutamates. It's very excitatory. So I would recommend, there's another brand called ENER-C, ENER/C, and that's more sort of more naturopathic, or it doesn't have aspartame in, and that's kind of like a multi-vit as well. But absolutely, supplementation at this present time is probably quite helpful, especially with vitamin C, especially vitamin D, and just having a good multi as well. I always say don't buy multivits from the supermarket, just because they're usually very low potency and often in formats that aren't as well absorbed into the body. For example, magnesium oxide is often used in sort of a lot of the supplements that you see advertised on the side of a bus, and oxide isn't as well absorbed as citrate or sulfate, so just to be aware of that. And yeah, vitamins are, but just make sure you've got minerals in there as well. So Biocare, a good brand, Viridian, Wild Nutrition, Solgar, all of these companies that you'd usually find in a sort of a health food shop, would definitely recommend. But also, if you have issues with your gut as well, probiotics can help. But you can also eat foods that are prebiotics and probiotics, like fermented foods are great. So kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir, even plain organic yogurt helps to benefit the good bacteria in the gut, which help keep our gut microbiomes happy. Yeah. Any more questions? I'm not sure there are, but if anything springs to mind, do email me, and I look forward to seeing you again in a couple of weeks. So have a nice afternoon.